All right, guys. So woke Fauci is going to deliver a speech, a commencement address at Emory College, in which he's going to discuss the apparent racism that's involved with the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm doing this video because this is just a continuation of the idea that black people can't do anything for themselves and that everything that happens to black people is because of racism and this system of white supremacy. Okay, black people can't even take responsibility for their own health. They can't use a computer. They can't get an ID to vote. You know, they can't compete with other races at an academic level. Again, guys, this type of language and rhetoric really annoys me, right? And this is why I have to make videos about it, because I have to dispel this idea that black people can't control their own destiny. Okay, and that black people don't have autonomy. And what Fauci's gonna do here is that he's gonna, again, be woke and try to say, oh, well, you know, this pandemic has shown all the racism in healthcare and it's disproportionately affected people of color and minorities and blah, 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 all that stuff. So we're gonna go through it, and I'm going to pause when I have something to say and give my counterpoints and then go from there. So let's get into it.
COVID-19 has shown a bright light on our own society's failings. Our country's experience with COVID-19 has not only upended our own lives, but it has uncovered a stark reality and failing of our own society. The unacceptable disparities in health experienced by minority groups, especially African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Americans. Many members of minority groups have a much greater risk of COVID-19, often because of the nature of the jobs that many of them have as essential workers in society.
Here we go. Are you saying that white people are not essential workers? Okay, because again, that's what he's implying here. He's implying that, well, black people, Hispanics, and, you know, other racial minorities, they're more disproportionately affected by the virus because they tend to be essential workers. Are there no white people that's essential workers who are being negatively affected by this virus? Why is it just that you have to point out those people? Why don't you just point out, well, our essential workers, whom are composed of all races, are being disproportionately affected by this pandemic because they're being more exposed. They have to interact with people more. Why don't you just say that? Why is it that you have to point out, oh, especially black folks who happen to be essential workers, okay, oh, they're the ones that's affected the most. When you have essential workers of all races, okay, police officers, essential workers, you have black police officers, white police officers, nurses are essential workers. You got black nurses, white nurses, Hispanic nurses, Asian nurses, doctors, people that work in retail, fast food. Essential workers are composed of people of all races, not just black people. Essential workers are disproportionately affected, period, regardless of the race. Again, guys, this is how they're trying to frame stuff. Only minorities compose mostly of essential workers. Don't worry. White folks are not a part of that. They're not a part of it. They don't do those jobs. They don't do essential workers jobs.
More importantly, when people of color get infected with SARS-CoV-2, they more likely will develop a severe consequence of the infection. And this is because minorities in general have a greater incidence and prevalence of underlying comorbid medical conditions, including hypertension, chronic lung disease, diabetes, and obesity.
Okay, so wait, let's talk about that. You're saying that minorities have a high rate of comorbidities, right? For example, like heart disease, hypertension, obesity, diabetes, things like that. Well, whose fault is that? Whose problem is that? Is that a societal problem? Is that a problem of white supremacy or racism? Or is that a personal problem? Because nobody is forcing somebody to eat unhealthy. The way that you develop these comorbidities, right? The way that you become obese is if you eat more calories on a daily basis than you take in. It's very simple. So if you eat a bunch of fast food and you don't eat your fruits and vegetables and you don't exercise, then yeah, you're going to develop health problems. A majority of health problems that are developed at the individual level are due to lifestyle choices. It's lifestyle and environmental. A majority. Now, there's some people that just unlucky, right? Some people genetically are, predisposed to certain illnesses, okay, just based off genetics. But a vast, overwhelming majority of people, in terms of their health and chronic diseases, most of it is determined by lifestyle and diet. Lifestyle and diet. Okay? If you eat healthy and exercise, you're way less likely to have any real chronic health problems. Way less likely. Doesn't mean you're guaranteed not to have any. It's just way less likely. So whose fault is that? That's the individual. That ain't got nothing to do with society as a whole and white people and racism and the fact that you're a minority. Like, for example, with me, guys, like, I'm a black person from the South, right? I'm from what I would define as a one-stop light country town. Growing up, ate a whole lot of pork, right? Pigtails, pig feet, chitlins, you know what I'm saying? Collard greens, fat bat meat in them. That's what we ate. It was cultural. But as I got older, okay, I got access to the internet. I was able to learn more about dieting, exercise, food. I was able to learn that stuff. I had access to that technology and that information. And I learned that eating that stuff on a daily basis is bad for me. Okay? And that's part of the reason why, again, black people tend to have a lot of these comorbidities and some of these pre-existing conditions because, again, our diets are bad. Again, some of it is cultural, right? Some of it comes from history. I get it. But at the end of the day, regardless of all that, it still comes down to an individual level. I don't have to eat that stuff. I can go to the gym and exercise. I can choose to eat lean meats, fruits, veggies. But again, this comes down to the individual. It has nothing to do with racism or just for the fact that, oh, you're black. No. Just because you're black doesn't mean you have to eat a certain way. Even if you grew up in a culture of eating certain things like I did. But I was smart enough to realize, okay, this isn't good for me. I need to change my diet. Now, don't get me wrong. I still love me some fat back meat and some collard greens, and some pigtails and all that stuff, but only on occasion, okay?
That lead to a multifold increase in hospitalizations and deaths from COVID-19 compared with the general population. Now, very few of these comorbidities have racial determinants, almost relate to the social determinants of health, dating back to disadvantageous conditions that some people of color find themselves in from birth regarding the availability of an adequate diet, access to health care, and the undeniable effects of racism in our society.
Wait, so he says that there's an undeniable effect of racism on our society. Okay, what is particularly racist? He talked about inadequate access to, I guess, healthy food, diet. Okay, what grocery store? Again, in one stoplight town I grew up in, people love to talk about food deserts. Food deserts, this, food that. We had a grocery store, right down the street. We had a grocery store, okay? And in that grocery store, you had fruits and vegetables, okay? You had lean meats. You had all the things that you would need to have a healthy diet. You had all that. How do you not have access to that stuff? Again, you might not have the information about how to eat healthy or, what a balanced diet looks like, but that's something that you can look up on the internet. Everybody has access to the internet. For the most part, most people do. It's up to you to choose whether or not you want to do that, whether or not you have an interest in eating any differently. And then he wants to talk about lack of access to healthcare. Well, again, in my same little one-stop light town, we had a doctor's office, right? We had a doctor's office. So again, I'm trying to figure out, what are you talking about? Now, I understand that, for some people, healthcare is unaffordable. I think that's a huge problem in this country. I really do. I think that's a huge problem in this country. I think that's something that we should definitely do something about. But to say that you don't have access to food and healthcare in my opinion, I'm not sure exactly what he's trying to say and how exactly is racism playing into this. Because again, to me, a lot of this stuff sounds like an individual choice. Individual choice. If the individual decides they want to eat McDonald's every single day, then yes, there's going to be consequences. Okay? It's just how it is. So next they'll try to tell you that McDonald's is racist. That's what they'll try to say. Why they put their vaccine sticker on your box of French fries to remind you to go get it, right? Just remember that, okay? On your box of French fries, they have a sticker telling you to go get the vaccine.
Let us promise ourselves that our corporate memory of this tragic reality, that an infectious disease disparately hospitalizes and kills people of color, does not fade after we return to some form of normality. Righting this wrong will take a decades-long commitment. I strongly urge you to be part of that commitment. Which brings me to my next point of discussion.
All right, I think he's done there. So basically towards the end, he was implying that they're going to try to address disparities in healthcare and health outcomes among, minorities versus the general population, aka white people, right? And obviously he blames this stuff on racism. But what's funny is that I never heard these calls of racism when there was videos during peak pandemic time of people who were black going out in clubs and hanging out and not wearing masks and not taking the proper procedures to protect themselves. I saw it. A lot of people was going out, having fun, clubbing, dancing, doing all types of things that were prohibited during the pandemic. And I'm not going to say that I may or may not have done some of that myself, but I'm not going to sit here and blame anybody or blame white people or blame society just because I had got the virus. I'm not going to blame anybody else for that. It was my own personal decision, okay, that led to that. I have nobody else to blame but myself. Nobody ever said anything about this when people on the right was saying, wait, hold on. Aren't these protests potentially super spreader events? Okay, this was back during peak pandemic when the science wasn't as developed on this. We were being extra cautious. Wasn't these protests potentially super spreader events? But yet everything that was done by Trump and on the right in terms of having an event, you guys framed as a super spreader event. But on the other hand, when it came to these George Floyd protests and these police brutality protests, people like Fauci try to tell people that, well, no, that's okay. And them being outside and not socially distanced, that's okay because police brutality in and of itself is its own public health emergency. And I'm like, really? Are you serious? Are you serious? So, again, man, listening to Fauci talk about this now, talk about the health disparities, among, people of color and, general society or whatever, when you talk about the virus, it just kind of falls on deaf ears. Because back during the time where a lot of these people were outside protesting in the street, not socially distancing, not wearing masks, you didn't hear any of this stuff. You didn't hear Dr. Fauci come out here and have concern about, well, you guys probably shouldn't be, doing all this stuff right now in the middle of a pandemic. No, you didn't hear any of that. Now, 1 year later, now is Fauci, boo-hoo-hoo. Oh my God, black people are disproportionately affected by the virus. Again, what was this concern a year ago? What was this concern at? Y'all was concerned about Trump, and every single time Trump and the Republicans had an event, whether it was indoors or outdoors, they was concerned about it. But they wasn't concerned about those so-called people of color that they claim that they care about so much. Again, in my opinion, guys, it's just another example of how the left just doesn't believe that black people have their own autonomy. They don't believe that we can do anything for ourselves, and that everything that happens to us, every single disparity has to be explained by, racism or white supremacy. And Fauci here just gave another example of this. But at the end of the day, like I was saying, people have to take responsibility for their own health. People have to take responsibility for their own outcomes. Okay? It's up to you to determine how to best take care of yourself. Okay? All the information's out there in the world. If you don't want to follow it, if you don't want to look it up, it's on you. It's on you. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.